Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. It was a question that gripped the world. Who killed Tupac Shakur? The 25-year-old rapper, considered one of the most influential artists of all time, was gunned down in Las Vegas in 1996. Well, on Friday, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis was indicted on one count of murder with a deadly weapon in relation to the killing. DJ Vlad, a major commentator in the hip-hop industry for years, admitted that police in Las Vegas asked him to help their investigation after he interviewed Keefe D for his own show. And DJ Vlad
and you
joins
said
me
Tupac
now.
pulled out a gun.
It looked like he was reaching, yeah. Yeah, it did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you actually see a gun?
No, shit. Once he got the reaching, I got the ducking.
So someone from your car
That's what happened.
started shooting at Tupac and Suge.
So Orlando shot across Dre?
He leaned over on the window, we rolled down the window, popped.
Who was it?
They would drove on my side, I would have popped them. You know what I'm saying? But they was on the other side.
Right.
Well, DJ Vlad joins me now. DJ Vlad, thank you very much indeed for joining the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I know you've studied this case for so long, and these interviews that you did with Keefe D, they've turned out to be extremely significant in this investigation, leading, in fact, to him being arrested and indicted. When you heard that news, how did you feel?
Well, I mean, the goal wasn't really to get anyone arrested. It was really just to get the truth of the matter. The story about Orlando Anderson killing Tupac, I've known since around 2007. So this was essentially the worst kept secret in LA. Everyone knew about it, but there were no arrests, there was no convictions, there was no anything, there was no actual proof. So there was a lot of conspiracy theories around it. So around 2008, when I first heard the Keefe confession tapes that Greg Kading got, then I found out there was a book that was about to come out. I got a hold of Keefe D and his co-writer, and we scheduled an interview, and we just went from there.
I mean, he appears to have incriminated himself in this interview, certainly the last one. Did you believe he was doing that as you interviewed him?
Well, I think that he believed that he had a level of immunity when he did the proffer agreement. I think at the time he was saying that he had cancer, so maybe he didn't think he had much time to live. So he was just kind of letting it loose at that point. But, it was a little bit crazy that he actually sat down and we did everything. And when I asked him about it, sometimes he would try to dodge certain questions, but ultimately I used the book as a blueprint. So whenever a question wouldn't get answered, I said, well, the book said X, Y, and Z. And then at that point, he kind of went along with what was written in the book.
It's been reported that you have resisted efforts by the police to hand over all the unedited tapes. Is that true? And if so, why?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, ultimately, people that we have on our show, we don't turn around and cooperate against those same people with the police. For me, just in terms of business-wise and my ethics and so forth, I just feel there's something wrong. So when Las Vegas police reached out to me multiple times, I just never responded. I think what they did ultimately want was the raw footage. That was an email that they sent after a couple of phone calls went unanswered. Ultimately, if you know the style of our footage, everything that we film gets released. So I think there's a little bit of a barking up the wrong tree situation, but maybe they thought there was a gotcha on there in the footage that was unreleased, which I'm not aware of it since everything did get released. But ultimately, we don't cooperate with the police. And, we've had situations where police have tried to get footage from us, and we've had our lawyers step in and actually block it.
Are you concerned? I mean, I've done many interviews, including crime interviews, actually, over the years. And there's always a certain element of concern as an interviewer when you stray into that kind of territory about repercussions from people involved. I mean, given there's now been an indictment here, are you worried about repercussions against you?
I don't worry about doing my job. I've been doing Vlad TV for 15 years now. We've covered a lot of very serious issues. We've interviewed like mass murderers like Sammy the Bull and so forth. So I don't really worry when it comes to doing my job. My job supersedes any level of concern or fear or anything else like that. And ultimately, if I ever feel there is a situation where there might be some danger, I always move with armed security.
You famously a very big fan of Tupac, as of course millions of people were, and it remained one of the great mysteries about this. If it turns out that your interviews have helped lead to solving this mystery, will you feel a sense of closure for Tupac and his family?
Well, I mean, for me, the closure came 4 years ago when I did the interview. There was a lot of conspiracy theories when it comes to Tupac. There was that, Suge had him set up. There was the government did it. There was the first responder had a body that he switched. The Tupac is living in Cuba somewhere. There's a lot of crazy theories out there. So for me, when I did the interview 4 years ago and we went through the entire story, really Keefe D's entire life story, but really leading up to what happened from Orlando getting jumped at the mall to the next few steps to them going to Vegas to what happened, during the fight to what happened afterwards. That essentially told the story.
Yeah.
I've been saying for years that I solved the Tupac murder.
Right.
When it comes to the family, I've had various family members reach out through people to say they're very happy about it. But the thing about it is, I know people that were very close to Tupac's mother, Afeni Shakur, and they all told me that while she was alive, she did not care about the police solving this case. The Shakur family had a very, bad relationship with the police.
Vlad, we've run out of time.
Afeni was even pregnant.
I'm really sorry. I'd love to have done more of this. Thank you very much for a great interview. I've been following you for a long time, and you're great at what you do, and I congratulate you on this. Thank you very much indeed. Given how dominant TikTok is on young people, is there an argument to ban it?
Our number one adversary, programming an entire generation with information.
China's been buying up farmland around American military bases, and you think this is very concerning. Why?
Is this just coincidence that they happen to buy the land? I don't want to become a conspiracy theorist, but I don't want to be naive either.
How big a problem, Phil, is what Elon Musk calls the woke mind virus?
I think it has been weaponized. People are now pursuing narratives that are trying to hijack core values in this country.
I don't want to be unkind to Oprah, one of the key faces of Weight Watchers, and it turns out you've been secretly on Ozempic. That is a deceit on the American people, isn't it?
What the hell business is it of anybody? Oprah could have kept her mouth shut, not said a word to anybody. Doesn't owe anybody an explanation.
He's long been known as America's shrink. Now the legendary Dr. Phil has decided it's time to put the United States onto his couch. His new TV network will tackle taboos and debate the thorniest issues dividing the country. After decades counselling stars and subjects on primetime TV, he's dispensing tough love on everything from cancel culture and childhood anxiety to the rising threat of China and the crisis at America's border. Now Dr. Phil goes uncensored. Dr. Phil, great to see you. How are you?
Good to see you, my friend. How's it going?
Well, I've known you a long time. I've known your tremendous ability to condense very complex issues into quite simple scenarios that can be resolved. America's a very complicated issue, isn't it, in totality? What is your take?
It really is.
What is your take, Phil, on where America is right now?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question in the way that you did, because I think America is experiencing, like a lot of countries in the world, but I think even more so in America, I think a lot of change right now. We're all experiencing change from technology, Pierce. We know that for sure. I think that a lot of unintended consequences are really impacting family. And I think family's the backbone of any society. And I think family in America is under attack. I think it's under attack as part of unintended consequences from technology. We can talk about that. And I think some of it is an intentional assault on family values in America. And I focus on family because I do think it's the backbone. I think if the family falls apart and starts to erode, then I think everything falls behind that. I think it all goes down the tubes if the family falls apart.
Yeah, I mean, you call the book We've Got Issues, How You Can Stand Strong for America's Soul and Sanity. people talk about artificial intelligence, so we can come to that. They talk about climate change. They talk about these things which could be an existential threat to the world. How big a threat do you think to people's well-being, particularly young people, is the cell phone?
I think it's probably the biggest change we've faced since the Industrial Revolution. The biggest change, and I know the Industrial Revolution can be divided up in maybe 3 or 4 industrial revolutions, but I think it's the biggest change. When the smartphone happened in 08, 09, kids stopped living their lives and started watching lives being lived. And then when they started doing that, they started comparing themselves to what they were seeing on these screens. And what they were seeing on these screens were not real. They were fictional. We had so many of these influencers and all putting these lives out there that were just produced. They were made up. And so kids, by comparison, were saying, wow, I don't have these fancy clothes. I don't go around in private jets. I don't live the way they do. So their self-worth really suffered. And we saw anxiety, depression, loneliness reach the highest levels since records were started being kept. We saw young people go into a mental health crisis, and it's just kept getting worse. And then when COVID happened, it really spiked because of the mismanagement of COVID, which I think was atrocious. I think the way young people were treated during this extended quarantine yanked their support system out from under them needlessly and put them in a real bind by pulling away their social development, emotional development, educational attainment, and left them in a real crisis that they're going to suffer for the rest of their lives. And so will this country. So I think it had a profound effect. People just started focus. I mean, think about it. We go through life this way. Then when the phone came, everybody started walking through life with their head down, looking at this screen. They started dating later. They started getting their driver's license later. They started having sex later. Everything got pushed aside by living virtually.
And in terms of the extraordinary explosion in anxiety, I've seen this amongst young people, people I know, unable to deal with what I would categorize as normal life issues and really finding just existing very difficult, despite in many cases having, on the face of it, very, content and comfortable backgrounds and lifestyles. How much of it is another part of what a smartphone does? I think you and I have discussed this before, actually, when I did your podcast, which is the sensory overload of negativity. And I think you gave an example of, like, when you were young, if something bad happened locally, say someone got eaten by an alligator on a golf course, it would be very unlikely that anyone outside of that locality would even hear about that incident. Whereas now, kids from Mumbai to Sydney to New York to London will be watching the alligator eat this golfer on their smartphone within 20 minutes. And they're getting that 24/7. And then you add in a war like Ukraine or Gaza, and the amount of stuff that I see on my phone, and I'm a hard-bitten old journalist, but if I was an impressionable 19, 20-year-old watching the horrific imagery coming in 24/7 from war zones, that alone is going to screw people up. Never mind all the fear of missing out stuff.
Well, you're exactly right. And I saw a great example of this right after 9/11. I was still doing Oprah at the time, and we did a show about 9/11 with Mrs. Bush, myself, and Oprah. And we had a group of really young children there, which amplified it even more. And what we learned, they were just watching on television then, not the smartphone, but on television. But they taught me a lesson that I'll never forget. We sat there and talked to these young children, and it became apparent because they watched it on ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, all these different channels. Those young children thought every building in America had been knocked down. They didn't realize that these were different angles of the same building. They didn't realize that they were seeing it over and over and over from different angles, from different points of view. And they thought they were all different buildings. They actually thought all the buildings in the United States had been knocked down because they were bombarded with so many images. And that's an analogy to the smartphone, in that these kids get all of these happenings, all of these images amplified so much that it takes on a life of its own. And I think they overreact to it. And I saw a stat the other day that said a significant percentage of young people around 18 years of age get 100% of their news from TikTok.
Yeah.
So if it's being programmed, if you've got propaganda being fed to them, then that's all they have. And I learned a long time ago working with juries that people make up their mind based on what they see and hear, not on what they don't see and hear. And that's a real problem. They don't realize that there's something else out there that they should take into account.
So there is a debate. There is a debate, Phil, about TikTok, isn't there, in America, with many Congress people wanting to ban it, actually, because they think that China is trying to surreptitiously attain information about Americans. You've got many people like Donald Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy on the right disagreeing and saying that companies like Facebook and the way they accumulate information, Google, X and so on, are just as culpable in this area. But given how dominant TikTok is on young people, and it's the #1 news source in the world now for under 24s, I read. Given that fact, is there an argument to ban it? Or, you're like me, we believe in free speech, and we believe in people having the right to access information if they want to. Is it contrary to that?
Well, I'm really concerned about the free speech aspect of this, but I'm also concerned that we do have our #1 adversary programming an entire generation with information. And I don't think it's an either-or situation. I am also very concerned about what's happening on Facebook, Instagram, those sorts of things, because I've written this new book, We've Got Issues, How to Stand Strong for America's Soul and Sanity. And this is a very prescriptive book. I hate people that criticize and don't have a better plan. Sam Rayburn, former Speaker of the House, is Texan. He said, any jackass can kick down a barn, but it takes a carpenter to build one back. And I think I want people to be carpenters. And I look at some of the research that's been done on TikTok and these other platforms. They feed young people information that upsets them. And why would they do that? Well, because they click more when they're emotionally invested. They click more than if they're watching puppies do cute things. They'll watch that for a little while and go, yeah, that's really cute. But then they lose interest. But if they're emotionally invested, if they're all upset about it, if they're really anxious about it, they're going to click more and hit and hit and hit. So that means more ad dollars. And the research shows that the algorithm will feed them upsetting information to keep them clicking. And we know that when they got these smartphones and got involved in this, anxiety, depression, and loneliness went to the highest level it's ever been, as I mentioned before. So they know that they got access to the same research that I do, but they keep doing it. So I do think that there is a right to free speech, but I think at the same time, we have to realize that our young people are being fed to the mill.
Would you ban TikTok, Phil, from America?
I would not ban TikTok, but I think I would certainly go on a very aggressive campaign to educate young people about what's going on. Young people, certainly teens, are pretty rebellious against authority. They don't like being manipulated. They don't like being fed what they see and don't see. And I think they need to be educated that they are being manipulated. I think they'll work this out on their own if people will just let them know what the hell's going on.
The wider threat from China, you've talked about this recently, that China's been buying up farmland around American military bases. And you think this is very concerning. Why?
Well, let's look at it on its face. I did an analysis of this, and look, I'm no politician. I'm certainly no geopolitical expert at all, but I also have common sense. And I know that we can't go into China and buy farmland, but they come over here and buy farmland. So what I did is I put on a map all of the biggest purchases that China's making of farmland. And then I did an overlay of strategic military installations. And that farmland that's being purchased is surrounding so many of these strategic
we have your map,
installations.
Actually. We have a copy of your map. I'm just going to bring it up here.
What?
And it is, on the face of it, actually quite concerning. And it does beg the question, why has it been left to you to do this? Why is the United States government, I mean, paying more attention to what may be happening?
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, let's look at, you see the red is the land that they're buying. And then I've identified the strategic military installations. And there's a third level that's not shown here that identifies what's actually happening at these bases. And what's actually happening is like training for the stealth bomber, different drone programs, all of these things that are going on that are pretty confidential and pretty strategic. Now, why would they, is this just coincidence that they happen to buy the land surrounding these military installations? That they have wind farms around some of these where there doesn't happen to be any wind, and the big fans are just sitting empty. I mean, they're just not spinning, but there are cameras and recording devices on top of the big pillars that have the fans on. The fans aren't spinning, but there's cameras on top of all of it. Now, come on. I mean, little Abner could figure this out. Of course, nobody but you and I are old enough to know who little Abner is. But,
I know who he is, obviously.
I mean, that just doesn't make common sense to me that we would allow that. Go into China and try to buy up land around their military installations and see how far you get.
I don't think you get very far. In terms of American politics, a massive election coming in November. It's got very toxic and tribal, even by American political standards, hasn't it, the landscape here? Donald Trump, by the nature of his character, is going to make people feel visceral pro against him. And then you have the issue with Joe Biden and his health and his cognitive ability and so on. What is your take on these two and what it says about America, that once again we're going to have Biden v. Trump, with one in his 80s, one about to head to his 80s, one facing 90-odd criminal charges, the other one barely able to stand on his feet. What do you feel about this?
Well, that seemed pretty old until recently. The older I get, the younger that seems. But I really do think that it's a bad commentary on where we are, but I think we've put ourselves there by you said it, being so tribal and so given to identity politics. And I always say I don't say much about politics because, frankly, I don't know much about politics. I don't think that makes me a lot different than people who do talk about them. I think a lot of people that talk about them don't know much about it either. I'm just willing to admit it. My focus is on the culture, and I think one of the things that we need to do, and in my new book, We've Got Issues, How to Stand Strong for America's Soul and Sanity, I talk about the fact that we do have issues in this country. And look, Pierce, we've known each other a long time. I love this country.
Yeah.
I stand up when the flag goes by. I put my hand over my heart when the national anthem plays, and I love it enough to admit that we got problems. I'm not defensive about that. We have big problems in this country, but I still love it. I'm proud to be an American. I'm tired of people apologizing for America every time they open their mouths. And I think it's a great country, but we've got issues, and I think our political system is pretty broken. But I have to tell you, I feel better when we're not all of the same party. If we've got a Republican president and a Democratic House or Senate, I feel a lot better than if they're all the same, because gridlock keeps them from screwing up too terribly bad. If they were all of one party and they could just kind of run their agenda, I would be really, really nervous. I think we are safer when there is that check and balance of a gridlock system. And
how big a problem, Phil, is what Elon Musk calls the woke mind virus? And the reason I say that is a study came out of Finland. They asked 5,800 college students to rate statements like, if white people have on average a higher level of income than black people, it's because of racism. And a statement like, trans women are women. They found that those who aligned with woke ideals had higher incidence of anxiety and depression. In other words, being too woke and chasing the woke mind virus agenda, as Elon would put it, actually does make you more anxious and depressed.
Well, I'm not surprised. I was not surprised to read that at all. I think that one of the things, being woke, as it was originally defined, was a good thing, right? Yeah. Because being woke described having sensitivity to those that had greater challenges in their life, whether it was physical disabilities or facing social challenges or whatever. And being sensitive to that was a good thing. But I think it has been weaponized. I think it has been turned on its head, and people are now pursuing narratives that are trying to hijack core values in this country. And it's gone beyond saying, look, live and let live. If we feel this way and this is how we want to live or identify or whatever, then we have the right to do that. The activists have pushed it beyond that. I call it the tyranny of the fringe. It's not enough to say, hey, listen, if that's what you want to do, it's a free country and you're entitled to do that. That's not enough anymore. Now it's got to be, you have to stand up and declare that I'm right. You have to stand up and declare that this is the new rules. This is the new science. This is the new biology. This is the new, or we'll attack you with a vengeance. And I'm telling you, Pierce, I think they pushed too far, too hard, too long, and are getting a lot of pushback from that middle 80% that have said, look, enough's enough and too much is too much.
Well, we saw it, didn't we, Phil, with the Dylan Mulvaney Bud Light fiasco. We've seen it with Disney being having a lot of problems when they woked up their movies, and there's been a huge backlash. You're seeing it time and again now, where I actually chart it back to when Gillette did that advertising campaign during the Me Too scandal. And they basically redid the whole feel of a Gillette advertising campaign from being something that embraced masculinity as a good thing to something that said if you're basically too masculine, you are automatically toxic and borderline Harvey Weinstein until you can prove otherwise. And I wrote at the time, this is an absolutely catastrophic failure to understand its audience. And sure enough, $9 billion later, off the bottom line, they did a screeching U-turn and went back to celebrating masculinity. But, I as a Gillette customer, I won't forget what they did or how they tried to make their male customers feel. And I thought it was disgraceful.
I couldn't agree more. And you saw people that don't want to take the risk of speaking out voted uh, with their pocketbooks.
Yeah.
They voted with because they could do that anonymously, and but I think it sent the message that we aren't nearly as aligned as you may think.
Mm.
And I'm very concerned. I've been really looking into what's being taught in the universities today, and they used to talk about toxic masculinity, but now they talk about masculinity as toxic.
Yes.
And I think that they consider a lot of things masculine, like aggressiveness in business, entrepreneurship, setting goals and pursuing them. Those things are been taken away from females and said, well, that's just masculine, and that's gauche. You shouldn't do that. And I really wonder where those people are going to be 5 years down the road when those young men are out married and they have a child and they're having to pay for childcare or braces or whatever. Those professors that are peddling that, you're not going to be able to find them with both hands and a flashlight because they're going to be gone when these guys are out there trying to compete in a dog eat dog world that's very competitive. We're not preparing these young people for the next level of life, and that's tragic.
I completely agree. You mentioned Oprah Winfrey earlier. You've known Oprah a long time. I've known Oprah a long time. What did you make of the whole Ozempic Weight Watcher thing that she got herself into? I mean, I thought she got out of it in very Oprah style, which was to turn it all into a kind of, a TV special, as Oprah does very brilliantly. But did you feel that, let's take a look at it first. Let's take a look at this.
I took on the shame that the world gave to me. For 25 years, making fun of my weight was national sport. And then I read the headline that Mr. Blackwell, the tastemaker of the time, called me bumpy, lumpy, and downright dumpy. Because when I tell you how many times I have blamed myself, because you think I'm smart enough to figure this out, and then to hear all along it's you fighting your brain.
Now, like I say, Oprah did what Oprah does best. She turned it into basically about her being a bit of a victim and people picking on her, and this isn't what it seems. But on the face of it, Phil, I don't want to be unkind to Oprah, but I think if you're one of the key faces of Weight Watchers, encouraging millions of American women that they should be losing weight in a certain way as dictated by Weight Watchers, and it turns out you've been secretly on Ozempic, which is a drug that makes you stop having pangs of hunger. That is a deceit on the American people, isn't it?
Well, I don't know what timeline you're looking at, but I can tell you this: when I pick up a news article or see something online that says so and so admits to using Ozempic or whatever, as you know, I spend a lot of my time in the litigation arena, and I associate the term admit with a confession of wrongdoing. And I see these different stars and they come out and say, this female movie star admits using Ozempic, or this male actor admits using this. What the hell business is it of anybody what somebody's doing in terms of their medical management? And what does it mean, admits using it? Is there some wrongdoing in somebody?
Well, I would counter
getting
that
with their physician.
I would counter
doing
that.
Something with their physician.
I would say generally you're right, but on the Oprah case, and again, I've got enormous respect for Oprah. She's an absolutely brilliant businesswoman. She's a brilliant television person, etc., and has done me a few big favors over the years. But if you're representing Weight Watchers, and that is not actually how you yourself are losing weight, and you get caught out having denied you're using one of these drugs, and then you have to admit it, you're kind of admitting not a crime, but you are admitting that you've been deceiving people, aren't you?
She didn't have to say anything at all. I think what Oprah did was discover that there was a really some breakthrough science that has identified that there are certain functions at a neurological level that cause people to be weight loss resistant, and they have spent years degrading themselves, putting themselves down, suffering in terms of self-worth, self-esteem, self-blame, being the butt of criticism and jokes. And she discovers, all of that time that I've been degrading myself, I've learned that there's something more to it than that. And so I'm doing something about that. And so I'm here to tell you of this revelation that I've had and share that with you so you can escape that suffering the way I have. Oprah could have kept her mouth shut and not said a word to anybody, doesn't owe anybody an explanation, doesn't have to say anything about it, but she chose to do so because she discovered something that she thought a lot of people, particularly women, were suffering through. And I think she thought, look, I'm going to take some heat for this, but I owe it to people to share this revelation and give them an exit ramp just like I've taken. And I commend her for doing it.
I mean, obesity is a massive problem in America, isn't it? How much of obesity is down to, in the United States, is down to diet, fast food, all the obvious things? And how much of it is down to mental strength, the ability to, reject the temptation, if you like, of all the fast food and so on?
Well, I think it's a complex issue. And I think there are some people that they have a metabolism that, they could eat a cow and everything that goes with it and not be affected whatsoever. And then there are some people that can, walk by an ice cream parlor and, it just seems by osmosis, they just absorb it and can't get rid of it. And I think that there's a whole spectrum there. And whether you're on an Ozempic type drug or not, you're going to have to make lifestyle adjustments, or there's no quick fix, there's no easy way out. You're still going to have to do the things that are necessary for long-term success. And there's a behavioral component, there's a mental component, there's a medical component, there's a neurological component, and it's not just one size fits all.
The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, there's so many things I could talk to you about, but you went down to the border on the southern border in the United States. Obviously, it's completely out of control now. It doesn't matter whether you're on the left or right. There's been a combined failure, I think, to properly regulate the border for decades now under endless administrations from both sides. But when you went down there, again, you're a guy that takes a complex issue and can often provide a simple solution. And I've seen you do it. It's a magical gift that you have for doing this. But the southern border, again, very complicated issue. What's the answer?
Well, I look at America as my home. And if I had guests, or I had people come to my home and knock on the door, before I let them in, I'd want to know who they were, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody comes to your home, you'd want to know who they were. And right now, that border is not really a border. We have ports of entry, and they're located in different spots where you go through and you process and make application. But then we've got hundreds of miles of the Rio Grande River in Texas, and then you've got 1,000 miles of border, or however many miles you've got across Arizona and California that aren't ports of entry. And I think people are just pouring across it. And I understand why people want to be in America. As I said, I love this country. I get why they want to be here. But when you come in uncontrolled, we have no idea who's coming in. I think it is an out of control situation, and I think the border needs to be controlled. And I talked to Brandon Judd, who is the head of the union for the federal border guards down there. I believe is his correct title. And I asked him, "What do you need? Can this get under control?" And he's been down there on that border for a long time, years and years and years. He said, "We don't need any more agents. We don't need any more money. We don't need any more laws. We just need to enforce the ones that are on the books.
Right.
That's all. And we'll get this under control, and we can get it under control right now." Right now, I think the border is controlled by the cartels. I think the fentanyl that's being manufactured in China is being routed to the Sinaloa cartel, and it's coming across the border like it's a drug highway. I mean, we have 100,000 fentanyl poisonings in the United States.
Crazy.
They're picking people up that'll have 10,000 pills in a backpack coming across the border. And those pills are 100% counterfeit, and the DEA says 42% of them have lethal doses of fentanyl in them. And they're just coming across. Between 2010 and 2020, there were maybe 1,100 Chinese that came across the border. In the first 11 months of 2023, there were close to 30,000. Now, look, a lot of those people are probably trying to escape the oppressive government in China. But it would be naive to think that so many military-age men are coming across the border without sponsorship of the government. We have no idea where they're going.
You think they're spying, Phil?
I think they're organizing in America, and there were so many that there were Chinese police departments being set up on the slide to control these guys. We don't know where they are, but let me ask you this, Pierce. If let's say there's 5,000 of them in the country, and they spread out across the country, and on a particular day, they decide to attack the energy grid in different strategic cities around the country, could they create havoc? I certainly think they could, and I think we would be naive to not consider that. I don't want to become a conspiracy theorist, but I don't want to be naive either. I think we've allowed people from Syria and Chinese and China and other places whose interests are not aligned with our own,
right,
to come across that border and not be tracked in the United States. We don't know where they are. We don't know what they're doing. We do know they own some farmland, and we know where that is.
Right.
But other than that, we don't know where these people are. And if that doesn't concern America and its allies, it should. And I think we're just foolish. And I am very pro-immigration. Let me tell you, we got a 1.6 birth rate right now. We need 2.1 to support our infrastructure. We need immigrants in this country. We need them to work and pay taxes and have babies and become part of this society. I'm very pro-immigration.
But it shouldn't be easier. It should not be easier to come into the United States illegally than it is to come into the United States legally, and that's the problem.
That's the problem, and I think we have some ownership in it, because it takes 7 to 10 years to get a proper hearing and get in, and some of them say, well, what am I supposed to do for 7 to 10 years? We've got to meet people where they are and understand that some of them truly are seeking asylum, and we've got to have some tracking system to know where these folks are.
Yeah, I agree. Phil, just want to ask you about something that happened in the UK recently. Puberty blockers have been banned now, which most people have thought is long overdue, should never have been allowed in the first place. Do you think a similar ban should happen in the United States?
Well, it's happened in the UK. It's also happened in other countries there that have done really substantial studies with large sample sizes that they have tracked across a number of years. And the reason for approving these, according to the medical associations, has been that there's a high degree of suicidal ideation and suicidality among these young people that feel trapped. And so they say, we've got to alleviate that. And so they do suppression hormones, they do testosterone blockers. In some cases, they actually do the surgery. They've done studies where they have compared groups that have gone through these different hormone suppressors, testosterone blockers, and or surgeries, and compared them to another group where they did just psychotherapy to deal with the emotional comorbidity that occurs with their body dysmorphia. And at 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, they found them to be in similar positions. So they got to the same place without the suppression, blockers, or surgeries.
Says it all.
So they hadn't changed their bodies and wound up the same place.
Yeah.
It seems to me that that's certainly the better route to go. And I think that's why the UK did what they did.
Yeah, completely. Phil, it's been great catching up with you. Thank you so much for being on Uncensored. The book is We've Got Issues, How You Can Stand Strong for America's Soul and Sanity. It's a fantastic book. You have a brilliant insight into these problems, and I hope people read it and listen to you. Thank you very much.
Great talking to you, Pierce.
Brilliant. Great to see you, Phil. And best of luck with the new network. I'm sure it'll be, like everything you do, a massive hit.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Take care. Well, Elon Musk is a crazy, brilliant, weird genius. And right now, probably the most fascinating businessman in the world. This is a guy who bets the bank on electric cars, on going to space, all this stuff. He's been dreaming this big since he was a 10-year-old kid. He's polarizing. He can be rude and obnoxious, but I never see those as necessarily bad qualities in a human being. Ultimately, he's a visionary, an entrepreneur, and a guy that dreams big. I think all the things that people criticised Keir Starmer for when he became Labour leader are now becoming electoral assets. They said he was too serious. They said he was a bit on the boring side. They said, that he was a lawyer. But when you have a shambolic prime minister, somebody who's loose with the truth, and somebody who prides himself on being able to be a buffoon, then actually, as we've seen in the pandemic, that can be a catastrophic thing for a country. And so I think that Keir Starmer and his qualities are becoming more appealing to the electorate rather than less appealing. I don't understand cultural appropriation. What does it mean? If you're celebrating another culture, what's wrong with that? I'm Irish. So if people put on a green hat and drink a pint of Guinness, would I be offended? No. Why would I? If they put on an Irish accent, would I be offended? No. Why would I? I don't understand this constant need to be offended. There are far more important things in the world to get offended by. So I think cultural appropriation, if you're mocking another culture, is unacceptable. But cultural appropriation, if you're celebrating another culture, is completely acceptable. I don't think it gets plus-size models, and I think, of course, there are lots of plus-size women that want to see stuff that they can buy in magazines and so on. My problem comes when Cosmopolitan put a £310 model on the cover of their magazine with a 5-page interview inside, celebrating the fact that she was morbidly obese. By morbidly obese, I mean she was, I think, 4'11" or 5 foot tall, 310 pounds. So actually, she's going to die if she's not careful because of her excessive body weight. So rather than try and have an inspirational piece about, I've got a real problem, I need to fix it, it was a celebration of morbid obesity, and that will kill people. So we've got to be realistic about the way we tackle these things. It's not healthy to be 310 pounds and 5 foot tall. It's unhealthy to the point where you're going to die. Let's say that and help people lose weight and get fitter. And yes, I include myself in that. The problem with the BBC is it's been overtaken as an institution and the way it runs through this license fee system by the streaming company. So young people are not going to want to pay for the license fee as some form of enforced tax. Now, what they might do is do what they do with Amazon, Netflix, and all the other things you can get as a streaming service, is they might pay the BBC for stuff that they want to watch, but they're not going to do it as an obligation from the state or the government. That clock is ticking. The BBC has to present a compelling enough amount of content that people will want to treat them like a streaming service. And I think the sooner they move to that, the better. But first, my brain dump. There's no need to exaggerate the current cost of living crisis. It's scary enough as it is. Just ask any family losing sleep over how to pay their bills or stunned into open-mouthed silence at the supermarket checkout. The cost of food, fuel and essential household products is rocketing around the world. Prices are rising by 9% in the UK alone. The last time inflation was so high was in 1982. So this is the worst financial situation we've faced in 40 years, and a desperately worrying time for millions of people. And when there's economic meltdown like this, we expect those whose job it is to fix it to offer us three things: solutions, common sense, and calm. Instead, the governor of the Bank of England, the most important financier in Britain, is running around like a hysterically hyperbolic headless chicken.
The one that I am going to sound, I guess, rather apocalyptic about is food. Sorry for being apocalyptic for a moment, but that's a major concern.
Have you felt a bit helpless through this period?
Well, yes. I mean, it is very, very, more than uncomfortable. I'm trying to think of a word that's even more severe than that.
Helpless? Helpless? Andrew Bailey, you're the governor of the Bank of England. It's literally your job to help us, not be helpless. And if the apocalypse is truly upon us, then nothing you do or say matters. That, Governor, is the apocalypse. Literally the end of the world. We'd all be dead. Now, you might think that Bailey and his team are working around the clock in their offices to rescue us, but you would be wrong. We learned today that Bailey is allowing his staff to work from home 4 days a week. Presumably they're all sheltering in their private home bunkers from the impending Armageddon. Bailey also says everybody else should think and reflect before asking for a pay rise, which is pretty rich coming from him when his salary is £575,000 a year, and when he's managing the economy with all his staff sitting at home on the sofa in their briefs on Zoom. Meanwhile, the former chief economist of the Bank of England says maths should be rebranded because it's frightening. Andy Haldane told The Times it should be called numeracy, which he says is less scary. What is he talking about? Perhaps he took his numeracy lessons like this.
We had 3 bats and one more, Sasha, makes 1, 2, 3, 4 altogether. 4 beautiful beauts. I mean 4 beautiful bats.
That was Count Dracula, get it? Terrifying, huh? But the last thing we need, in all seriousness right now, is a ridiculous debate about whether poor little snowflakes can handle the word mass without going into spontaneous anaphylactic shock. The only thing that's really frightening about the numbers right now, and you haven't got to be Einstein to work this out, is rocketing inflation. The governor and his stay-at-home staff should get serious about a serious situation. Stop waving the white flag of surrender, stop using woefully irresponsible language, and get the hell back to the office. The British monarchy undoubtedly has a lot to answer for if you consider the grand sweep of history. King Henry VIII had what's now known as a highly problematic relationship with women, especially when they were in close proximity to a guillotine. His daughter, Queen Mary, was a big fan of burning Protestants in front of large crowds, which is all now frowned upon. And don't even get me started on King George III, without whose madness and incompetence I would almost certainly be addressing you now as the King of the United States of America. The truth is that Britain's had kings and queens for about 1,200 years. And as with US presidents, some have been dumb, mean, malevolent, or useless. Others, including the current Queen, have been magnificent. Similarly, the British Empire was responsible for very good things and some very bad things. But they all happened in the past, a long time ago. Different rules, different rulers, a different age. That's how history tends to work. None of it has got anything to do with today's royal family. But today, sadly, every royal tour is now dominated by a shrieking chorus of demands from social justice stirrers for them to issue endless apologies for the past. The latest target is Prince Charles, who's visiting Canada to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee.
We must find new ways to come to terms with the darker and more difficult aspects of the past, acknowledging, reconciling, and striving to do better. It is a process that starts with listening.
It is, but once you start apologising, Your Royal Highness, trust me on this, it'll never stop. The royals face demands from rights groups in Canada to formally apologise for the way Indigenous people were treated during the Age of Empire. This after the Earl and Countess of Wessex faced protests over Britain's historic links to slavery on a visit to the Grenadines. And the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge were met with demands for reparations in Jamaica. Now look, it's beyond question that the British Empire committed atrocities by the enlightened standards of today's world. Just as it is beyond question that there are many things we can be ashamed of in our past. But there are also many reasons why we should be extremely proud to be British. We're a great country that's done many great things. Yet all of the good stuff is being forgotten as the royals embark on what now seems to be an endless, grovelling apology tour for the behaviour of ancestors. Well, I've got an apology, and it's this. I'm sorry, but I'm finding these constant apologies by the royals increasingly irksome. Obesity has reached epidemic proportions globally, with at least 2.8 million people dying because of it each year. More than half of young American adults are either overweight or obese. In England and Scotland, obesity is now a bigger cause of death than smoking. But rather than tackle this problem head-on with the action that's urgently required, woke warriors want health professionals to ease off on the global fat fight because, you guessed it, it's racist. The University of Illinois Chicago School of Public Health says weight stigma is discrimination or stereotyping based on a person's weight and is one of the last types of discrimination still condoned and carried out by public health and medical experts. This report says focus on body size is rooted in racism dating back to Charles Darwin, and stigmatizing words like obesity should be dropped for terms like people in larger bodies. For the love of God, the people being lectured about all this are doctors, highly educated medical professionals. They should be allowed to get on with their jobs without worrying about upsetting people who need to lose weight. And by the way, here's a pro tip. If you do want to lose weight, and take it from me, someone who's carrying a bit of excess timber, the way to do it is to do a bit more exercise and stick with a little less food and alcohol down your gullet. That normally tends to work. The idea it's now deemed racist to criticise morbid obesity is yet another symptom of the woke virus's grip on common sense. We now know that higher mortality rates from COVID-19 in the black community were linked to obesity. When we tell the medics who are mobilised in the fight on fat to stand down because it's racist, we're actually putting our minority communities at greater risk of poor health and death. And that, ironically, is racism. Professional footballers are among the most lavishly paid athletes in the world. Top players can earn millions every month for kicking a ball around, which obviously sounds ridiculous in an economic crisis, but their salaries are driven by market force. They get paid a lot of money because they're the best at what they do, and they make a lot of money for their teams. And the same simple economic calculation should apply to men and women. That's why I'm in total agreement today with the groundbreaking decision by the US Soccer Federation, not with their decision to call themselves Soccer Federation. It's football, but their decision to pay its women team the same amount it pays the men. US women have fought hard for equal pay for years, and here's their victorious captain today.
I am feeling extreme pride, and to be able to say finally equal pay for equal work feels very, very good.
Well, she should. She's earned it. They all have. The US women's football team is a ruthless winning machine. Skilled, strong, resilient champions. They've won 4 World Cups, 4 Olympic golds. Compare that with the US men's team, which has won absolutely nothing and is about as entertaining to watch as a Meghan Markle podcast. It's not realistic right now for all female sports teams or individual sports women to earn the same as male counterparts. It depends on the sport, the level of success, their star power, and particularly on revenue streams from crowds and television. But in this case, it's a no-brainer. The US women's team may be very smug, and annoying. But honestly, they've got every right to be. They're more successful than the US men's team by far. They get bigger crowds, just as many sponsors, and they're actually much bigger stars. If anything, they should be paid more than the men.
So, yes, Piers, I have a question. James Sudridge, thank you so much for joining us.
Always
this
a pleasure.
evening. Piers Morgan has a question for you. How can Boris Johnson stay in office tonight?
I'm happy to answer questions from you. My wife would divorce me if I took questions from Piers Morgan.
Let me put my cards on the table. I've always supported trans rights to fairness and equality, and I mean that sincerely. I want everyone...
bro.
Well, you can say bro, and that's fine. You're entitled to. It's an uncensored show, and you've just proven it. But let me just say to you, I always
wasn't your profile picture.
Well,
wasn't your
hang
profile
on,
picture
I
you
listened to...
identifying as a penguin?
Congratulations on a hole in one.
All right, thank you very much.
And thank you for a great interview.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go.
That was a great interview.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Turn the camera off. Thank you, sir. Very dishonest.
Stanley, it's great to see you. As always, an effervescent presence.
And you are a cheater, I've got to tell you, Piers. You know, you lured me in here. It was a bit like Cecil the Lion.
Are you suggesting I'm a trophy hunter? I lured him a trophy.
I don't think I'm a trophy.
You know
but
what?
Anyway.
There's nothing wrong with defending your son, by the way. And we got to talk about trophy hunting and your book. And I showed you doing a handstand. The words you're looking for, Stanley, are thank you, Piers. Good to see you.
See you all, folks.
Tell Boris to come in soon.
No honesty, no objectivity, no openness. He has trashed every single one of the standards in public life. And Piers, I've got to tell you, I thought I was coming on to talk to you because you're quite a serious person. I've got Sherwood on pause downstairs. Take Douglas Murray, take him back and put him in his 55 Tufton Street bin, and I'll see you later. All the best.
Thank you, Alistair Campbell.
Nice to see you. Piers, take care. Lots of love to Erin.
Thanks for joining us,
Lots of love.
Alistair. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. We've sadly lost Alistair Campbell. I would support you. The problem I have with your tactics is you put me off supporting you. You don't bring me to your protest. I don't think, oh, I want to join these guys. They're making a great point. I just look at this poor woman and think, why have you done that to her and her kid? I look at these terrible stories of a woman left paralysed because you lot were lying in front of a car. It's like, why do that? There are other ways to protest.
Because you're not listening to what I've just said. You're not emotionally connecting to the fact that what I've just said to you is 1 billion people...
Actually, you're not listening to what I'm saying.
No, I am, but what I'm saying was we're in this
what you're not hearing is I'm agreeing with your cause, with the campaign you're waging.
Just said to you it's
I
not
just don't
a
agree
cause.
with the tactics. I want you to concede, Liam.
But I don't agree with government criminality.
Let me finish. I have issues about safety for women. I have issues about other areas of women's rights. Do you understand...
Piers,
well, let me
shut
finish.
up,
Let me ask
bro.
you a question. Do you understand and appreciate...
What are all these dog whistles and talking points?
They're not
Do you
dog whistles and
understand the
talking
majority of
points.
women athletes
They are
do not give a
legitimate
shit
areas
about
of
trans women in
concern.
sport?
You can't just call everyone who disagrees
Piers,
with
you're an
you
uppers sketch. Shut
transphobic.
up, please.
If you keep swearing, I'll have to cut you off.
You can go and have a look at their websites. You can have a look at their Twitters. Like, they are transphobic.
But I am
Kelly
talking
J.
to you...
Keane was kicked out of
I
Women's...
just
Kelly
said
J.
to you...
Keane
All
was
right, if you're
kicked
going
out
to...
of Women's Place UK for being
If
too
you don't want to have a
racist.
civilised
Like, these are not
conversation with
good
me...
people.
OK, look, I'm trying to give you a chance. I've explained my position. What is your problem with my position?
I don't really know. I'm going to leave the interview now. I kind of only came on here because I thought it would be kind of funny. But I want to say you're a and you're a fascist.
All right. Well, I apologise again to all viewers who are listening to that. Unfortunately, a complete idiot. And
When was the last time you went to university, Piers? When
actually,
was the last time you were a student?
I was a student when I was 19.
Oh, how old are you? That was a long time ago. That is a long ass time ago.
You're being ageist.
Can I say that?
You're being ageist.
No, I'm just saying.
Wow.
That's a fact.
I'm
it was
triggered.
a long time ago.
Triggered. Can you not? No, can you not
Honey,
be...
you're the snowflake
no,
here.
can you not be
You're the
ageist?
snowflake here.
On the vote of their confidence.
Okay,
Gay is
just
following
ask him.
through on
Does
that.
he think he's now Britain's comical ally?
Sorry.
I've got Piers in the end. The only person that's comical here is him. He should get back
Well,
to
if you
Love
can hear
Island
me, if you
and
can
get
hear
out of
me,
my ear set.
if you can hear me, you're being.
I love Kate. I will answer to Kate, but I'm not going to answer to you. I think it's very, very bad TV. I don't need to be disrespectful.
Okay, look,
Really? Well, okay, let me tell you what I think of
I'm in the
you,
middle
you
of
impertinent
something.
little twerp,
I'm in
right?
the middle of
I
something
think you're
here.
very bad
Let's
TV.
get-
You're the comical
Yeah,
alley of
absolutely.
British
Do carry on
politics,
if you
and
want.
everyone's laughing at you. So if I suggest you
get
take your
one.
little
Sorry,
mic
I was
off
happy to
and
do
pop
it
off
with you,
back
as you know.
inside. Rude
But,
little
you know,
man. Off you
hopefully
go.
it makes good TV. But, you know, this crap about it being like Love Island is rubbish. We love one another.
Thank you so much. Piers, I think unfortunately we've lost our opportunity to talk to James there. But James,
Bless you. Thank you for your
so
time.
much. Let me help you unclip that, which is in your pocket. There we go.
I didn't mean to be rude. I hope
That's
I'm not-
quite all right. But Piers, look, one of the big things there. One of the big.
Well, hang on, Kate. We can't just pretend
Let
what
me help
happened
you.
didn't just happen.
Thank you.
Is he
Thank
still
you so
attached to
much.
you?
Thank you. Thank you.